Welcome back to the 504 Core Podcast, episode 86. Here with Zack Nagy. What's been up, man?
Not too much. Obviously, we're dealing with a team that's in a 3-game losing streak, struggling. But there's a lot of other stuff to talk about. We got the early signing period coming closer. LSU's got to keep on with that recruiting class that they have. Fast forward, shift pace to Vanderbilt in the next coming days, and kind of move forward from here. Obviously, it's been a struggle with A&M, Vanderbilt, or A&M, Alabama, and Florida, but move on. Life goes on, and we'll talk about it.
Yeah, let's go with recruiting. Obviously, Bryce Underwood's been the big topic of discussion. Seems like it's a little overblown. Cut out there for a second, but yeah, everyone's talking about Bryce Underwood. Is it overblown? Is it not? LSU people seem pretty, positive that they'll retain him. What's the latest with him you're hearing?
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of when he puts pen to paper with LSU at this point. I think you're going to continue to hear outside noise with Michigan, and rightfully so, man. Like when $10.5 million are thrown in your face, it's hard not to kind of sit back and entertain it. But look, dialogue's been sitting there between Michigan and Underwood's camp for the foreseeable, or for the last couple of weeks, is really what I'm trying to say here. There's been dialogue. It's been continuing, but LSU's confidence hasn't wavered. They don't seem worried about it right now. Early signing period's inching closer on December 4th. That's when things will become official. But LSU feels confident that Bryce Underwood signs with the program, and that's really kind of the buzz right now. You're seeing $10.5 million being thrown out, but a lot of people are sitting here kind of acting like he's going to LSU for free. No. I mean, LSU's offering a pretty impressive NIL package of their own to compensate the number one player in America. This is the number one quarterback, but also the number one overall player in the country as well. So LSU's compensating him. There's an NIL package in place, and they continue kind of increasing it over and over again as more counters keep coming on the Michigan side. But Bryce Underwood hasn't visited Michigan one time, man. He hasn't been there unofficially or officially at all. The only visits he's taken are to Baton Rouge, both unofficially and officially, and all signs point towards him wrapping this thing up on December 4th in the next couple of weeks, signing with LSU, enrolling early, and getting a head start at his career in Baton Rouge.
Yeah, I mean, he basically had a family reunion at the Bama game, it looked like. I mean, I saw videos. There was like so many people there. Do you know like the ballpark figure? Have you heard of a number for his NIL number for LSU?
There's definitely a pretty significant number in place there. Not anything that I can really talk about, but it's a significant number that they're willing to put together for him. Not $10.5 million, of course. I mean, you have Michigan throwing the house at this kid right now, but there's an offer in place that compensates the number one player in the country really, really well. It's just a matter of time until he wraps this thing up. It's been a saga that everybody's been kind of talking about for a little bit too long now, but his actions have spoken louder than words, and it's just a matter of time until this thing ends.
Yeah, and then, I mean, if you honestly break it down, 10.5, yeah, it is a significant number. I'm not diminishing that at all, but if that's over a 4-year period, right? So that's 2.6 over, each year. I don't know. I think Cam Ward has been reported he gets like 3 or 4 a year. So, he'll go to a system.
The number to keep tabs on here is Nico, the Tennessee quarterback. That's the one that a lot of people you can use in comparison to. Nico was one of, if not the top quarterback in the class 2 years ago, and he got a reported $8 million NIL package from Tennessee, roughly $2 million a year. So that's the one that a lot of people are like keeping tabs on here. Obviously, the bar has been set way higher for Bryce Underwood being $10.5 million over X amount of years. But when you're comparing these packages of some sort, it's Nico and Bryce. Those are the two that you keep tabs on. Cam Ward, of course, got a big package from Miami, but those are the two. Like that's the ballpark that you're sitting in, and it's interesting. It's really it's not going to stop until revenue sharing comes in the mix, potentially this upcoming offseason. Once that happens, there'll be a quote unquote salary cap, and you'll be able to kind of have a set contract per player. Right now, it's a free for all.
There'll be a salary cap for the NIL.
There'll be a revenue sharing is basically an increment of money that you'll get that you have per team that you can spend. So it's like if you're looking at the Saints and you have a $100 million salary cap, you can only spend $100 million on your roster. LSU and other programs will have that kind of salary cap with the X amount of dollars that they can spend on the roster. And there'll be numbers that'll be out in the public as well. But you'll have your NIL deals on the side as well. So there's always going to be pros and cons. But revenue sharing will be something that'll kind of put this to a kind of slowdown.
That's really interesting. How does that work in the SEC? Like if LSU makes $500 million a year and Auburn makes $400 million a year, are they going to have the same salary cap? How's that going to work?
So it's TV deals is what I don't want to say anything that I might
Like
not
the
be as
conference?
educated on,
Like
but
conference?
each conference has TV deals, and I believe
Okay.
that they split the money up in that regard. Could be so wrong. I'm going to talk to somebody later today about that, but that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah, no, dude, it's the Wild Wild West. I mean, it's basically professional sports at this point. You know, it's just craziness. I don't really know what to make of it. But yeah, I mean, people see the 10.5 for Bryce Underwood and they think, oh, wow, what a big number. It is a big number. I'm not diminishing that. But when you really break it down, 2.6. So if that's over 4 years, he's probably going to go through. If he lives up anywhere near the hype, he's probably going to go in 3 years. So,
Yeah.
that's how you kind of have to look at it. And then if he's in a good system with, a good team around him and he's putting up like Heisman type years or whatever it may be, just really, really good years, that number is going to increase. If he goes to Michigan, the track record of quarterbacks hasn't been as strong, and he's come out and said that. I've even seen your tweet about that where he said the video. He's like, who has Michigan really produced at quarterbacks?
Right.
So that number can only grow. So like even if LSU offers 6 or 7 or whatever the number may be, you can get that number up. And maybe he's probably betting on himself in that fact. But yeah, 10.5 million is nothing to sneeze at. But it is interesting. He lives 30 minutes away and doesn't even feel like taking a visit,
Yeah.
official or non. Official. So, I always thought that was pretty interesting. Any other recruits to keep your eye on? Maybe flip watch or just any kind of retention scares or anything like that?
Yeah, so the number one player or the number one offensive lineman in Louisiana just flipped his commitment to Ole Miss, Devin Harper, and that was one where the writing was kind of on the wall. He was a guy who was kind of had one foot out the door over the last couple of weeks, and then of course a timely post where he flipped right after LSU lost to Florida. But nonetheless, you lose the number one offensive lineman in the state. It's going to hurt to a certain degree. Brad Davis has proven that he's an elite level recruiter. He has guys in this class that are very coveted. But to lose Devin Harper is a pretty significant loss right now. And other guys to kind of keep tabs on here is going to be Derek Meadows, 4-star wide receiver out of Las Vegas, Nevada. He's a guy who goes to Bishop Gorman, and he's visited Notre Dame, Michigan, etc. And when you're looking at flip watch candidates, Derek Meadows is definitely one that's right up there. And it's a potential flip to Notre Dame is one that a lot of people are talking about. There's a lot of buzz right there. He's going to try to make his way back in town before the season ends. He has not visited LSU one time this season. So to get him in town will be a pretty big deal. And that's one. Derek Meadows keep tabs on. And then Mike Tyler, the 3-star tight end out of South Carolina. He's visited South Carolina 4 times this season, has not taken a game day visit to LSU just yet. There's some buzz that he might try to make his way in as well before the season ends. But you're looking at 2 players other than Devin Harper that are on flip watch. It's certainly going to be Mike Tyler and Derek Meadows. And a name that a lot of people want to talk about is DJ Pickett right now. It's the number one cornerback in America who just took a visit to Georgia. And it's interesting that he's keeping contact with Georgia, keeping contact with the Miami Hurricanes. But everything that I've heard would say that DJ Pickett's going to put pen to paper with LSU and ultimately sign during the early signing period before enrolling early. So those are the 4 names that a lot of people are kind of putting in reports right now, other than Bryce Underwood. It's going to be DJ or Devin Harper, who's gone, Derek Meadows and Mike Tyler, who are on flip watch. And then, of course, you got DJ Pickett in the mix, too.
What made Harper flip?
Harper flipped on Saturday night right after the game.
No, but like what made him flip?
A lot of things.
Do you think it's like on LSU side, or do you think it was more like Ole Miss trying to do something?
Ole Miss just putting together some NIL packages, and Ole Miss trying to get some flips before the early signing period begins.
Gotcha. And then, do you think Meadows flips? I mean, if you had to predict, do you think you'd flip?
I mean, he's certainly one that is on heavy flip watch right now. If they can get him in town for an official visit or an unofficial or official visit, that'll be good for them to just kind of get the dialogue continuing to roll in person. He's already visited Michigan. He's already visited Notre Dame. He's already checked out those schools. So the one that you want to try to get him in is going to be this weekend or next. And I think he could ultimately end up in somebody else's class, of course.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I kind of remember they Neighbors was committed to Mississippi State or wanting to go to Mississippi State, and then I think LSU lost a receiver, and then they started targeting Neighbors at the very end. I remember Neighbors kind of like a late addition. Do you think there's any kind of late additions to this class like that? Especially if Meadows flips, you see a lot of teams lose a guy and then kind of go after a different guy in the same position. Is there anyone?
On the receiver front, it's challenging at this time to say because they've already gone through their senior evals and they haven't necessarily dished out other offers. There's a guy that was on their radar that was CJ Wiley, who ultimately decommitted from
Yeah.
Florida State and went elsewhere. So receiver wise, I think they're just going to hit the portal with force and try to go get a wide receiver one. I really do think that that's going to be the approach that they take there. But when you're looking at a late addition in the 2025 recruiting class, all signs go on the 5-star defensive lineman Jakeem Stewart. This is a guy who's taking his time in the process. He's going to sign with the team during the early signing period when he announces his commitment at that time. But it's a battle between LSU, Ohio State, USC, and Oregon. And he's really, really going through the process, enjoying it. He's fresh off of an official visit to USC where he was there for a 3-day stay. So really enjoying his time. He's already taken an official visit to LSU and Oregon as well. He'll be back in Eugene for an unofficial visit this upcoming weekend. And then he'll take his final visit to Ohio State on November 30th to wrap things up before putting pen to paper the following week with the program. But when you're looking at last-second additions, quote unquote, it's Jakeem Stewart. All eyes are on what the 5-star does towards the end of this recruiting process.
See, he's crystal ball to LSU, right?
He's received a crystal ball to LSU by numerous analysts, but we're looking at one that's going to come down to the wire. Ohio State's one that's really has his attention. LSU obviously has his attention being the hometown school. And then Oregon's one that obviously has piqued his interest in a heavy way on the NIL front. He was on an official visit on October 12th, enjoyed that enough to where he's now set an unofficial visit for this upcoming weekend. So they can piece together a lot of money on the NIL front with the Nike money that they've got out there. So that's one that certainly got his attention. It's the number one team in the country, Mike. Like, this is a team that they're clicking on all cylinders. Dan Lanning's kind of the man out there, and he's crushing in recruiting. So we'll see what happens there. But LSU's definitely the team to beat here down the stretch. Frank Wilson's running his recruitment. He's proven that he's not going to let guys in the New Orleans area leave on his watch. So we'll see if he can strike gold again on this one. But Ohio State and Oregon are certainly pushing down the stretch.
Yeah, I remember Phil Knight, the founder of Nike, came out a couple months ago, and he's just like, "We're
blank checks."
Yeah, blank checks. I mean, he's like 100 years old at this point too, so he's got money to spend. Kind of sticking with it is always kind of nice seeing that, like, if Jakeem Stewart does go, it's kind of nice to see him not go to Bama, not go to Georgia, not go to another SEC program. Like, he's going to a school that probably won't affect you, and if it does affect you, you could see him down the line in a championship game. But LSU has a lot more problems to deal with before that kind of problem arises. So, or a good problem arises. So, yeah, we'll see. Kind of speaking on Oregon a little bit, DeCorian Moore kind of made a surprise for Bama. I think there's any way they back, or do you think it's just kind of like cater me around kind of thing?
I think DeCorian Moore is going to put pen to paper with Oregon and lock things up there. He's taking his visit now to come check out LSU for the Bama game. But to me, that's just him coming to see one of his really good friends in Caden Durham. The two played their high school ball together at Duncanville High, and he was coming to see his friend. LSU had the chance to roll out the red carpet and do what they needed to do. But when you lose in a lopsided fashion like that, it'll hurt a guy like DeCorian Moore, who's certainly one who's ready to play for a championship contender right off the bat. So I think they might have missed their shot there on that front. I think he signs with Oregon.
Yeah, people are like, "Oh, why are you taking these guys?" Well, like, everyone bitches about college football and transfer portal and NIL. Like, think about how fluid it is. If he goes to DeCorian Moore goes to Oregon and wants to transfer out, who are going to be the teams that call him first, and who is he going to want to talk to immediately? It's going to be like LSU, Texas, all these other schools. So it's always good to keep a relationship with these kids. But yeah, I saw that. I was pretty interesting. But yeah, trying to think if there's any other recruiting stuff that we haven't touched on. Yeah, I think good. That's pretty good with recruiting. Do you want to do a quick Bama recap? We haven't talked since then.
Yeah, I mean, it was an absolutely abysmal performance. There were no, like I've said to everybody that I've talked to about it, there were no positives to take away from that game at all. The run game was gone. The passing game, it's predictable at this point. You couldn't find any way to open up your offense because Bama knew exactly what was coming. So on that front, it was ridiculous. And then you look at defensively, you couldn't stop Jalen Milroe at all. The defense couldn't finish a kid's meal. I mean, every single time Jalen Milroe got the ball in a misdirection, the defense looked lost, and they didn't want to hit him. Major Burns, Jordan Gilbert, et cetera. Nobody wanted to touch Jalen Milroe, and at the end of the day, he ends up with 185 yards on 12 carries. I mean, that's ridiculous to allow that when you had 2 weeks to prepare for a mobile quarterback. So Jalen Milroe got the best of him. You look at the box score, you look at the stat sheet. He beat him single-handedly offensively. mean, he did everything. 185 yards rushing, 109 yards passing. I mean, he did every single thing he needed to do for that team. He beat LSU single-handedly. So it was one that really set the tone for the rest of the season. Obviously, you go and you lose to Florida the following week. So just a challenging loss, one that had a lot of people scratching their heads, no defensive adjustments, nobody stepping up to the occasion. And in my opinion, the most unprepared Brian Kelly team I've ever seen.
Yeah, no, it hasn't been really good. There's just really no one that's really like stepped up, honestly.
Well, the only player that you could look at that has potentially kind of risen to the occasion this season is Whit Weeks at the linebacker position. And then he lays an egg at Florida the following week where he graded out as the lowest player on defense with like a 35.9 PFF grade. So it's just you're going to find out who wants to fight for this team now. You got 2 weeks left, Vanderbilt, Oklahoma, and we'll touch on that in a few. But this is now the time is now to find out kind of what the future of your program looks like, and you got to throw the youngsters on the field.
Yeah, no, it's pretty interesting. I mean, Whit Weeks, he's a good player. He's like one of the only few playmakers you have on the defense. I mean, I put Swinson. I don't think Zy Alexander's a playmaker, but he's very, very, very solid. Like he won't get beat. He doesn't give up a lot of yards, and that's all you really want from a corner. But he won't like pick the ball off a ton. Yeah, Swinson, Weeks. But yeah, the thing about Weeks is he misses a lot of tackles, but then he makes like when you're starting to ask yourself why does he keep missing these tackles? Like take him out of the game, then he makes a play. He's like one of those kind of players. So yeah, if he's not making plays, it's usually not pretty good. But yeah, no, that hasn't been good on the defensive side of the ball. Why did Swinson and Sage Ryan get benched the first?
It sounded like it was disciplinary reasons. Just not living up to the standard, I guess, in practice that week. And you saw Braden Swinson and you saw Sage Ryan get benched for the first quarter. But the other guy who was not with the team over the weekend was Deshaun Womack, a former 5-star defensive end. He's a sophomore right now, and he's been in the rotation pretty heavily alongside Braden Swinson and Savion Jones. And he did not travel to Gainesville over the weekend, but he'll be available this weekend against Vanderbilt. But again, disciplinary reasons.
Womack was disciplinary reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Has that been disclosed, or is that like?
Yeah.
It's I don't know, man. I had higher hopes for him because like he's kind of like a third down like pass rushing specialist last year, and he flashed when he played. I mean, I remember a couple of games last year he played like 10 plays, and like 2 out of the 10 plays he'd make plays. So yeah, I was kind of hoping something for that. Do you think he could possibly transfer out after this year, or do you think he'd be like one of the guys to keep an eye out for just transferring?
Yeah, I think he'll be the name to keep tabs on when it comes to the transfer portal. LSU could try to swing for the fences and keep him back in Baton Rouge, but he'll definitely be a transfer portal candidate when it's all said and done. He just hasn't played that much. And whether it's development, whether it's just him not fitting the scheme or whatnot, I don't really know enough on that front to kind of dive into that. But I think when you have a 5-star prospect who expected to make an immediate impact, and he hasn't really done that in his first 2 seasons in Baton Rouge, I think in this new age of the transfer portal, he's going to want to go make an impact somewhere else, and he could definitely be one that enters the portal in December.
Who else do you kind of should keep tabs on for the transfer portal this offseason?
See, we're still in the middle of the season, so I don't quite have any, like, let's say, quote-unquote, intel on guys who are going to or could be entering the portal. But if you were going to ask me my opinion on guys to keep tabs on, it would be a guy like Deshaun Womack, of course, a guy like Caleb Jackson, who you have Caden Durham established as your guy. You're bringing in Harlan Berry. You're bringing in JT Lindsey, the top 2 running backs in the state of Louisiana. So Caleb Jackson just hasn't really found his niche on this offense quite yet. So you could see Caleb Jackson be a guy who ends up departing as well. You look at the quarterback room, a guy like Ricky Collins could certainly look to go get some immediate playing time elsewhere. Writing's also on the wall for him, man. You got Garrett Nussmeier, who's potentially coming back next year. You got Bryce Underwood, who's the future of the program. Just seems really unlikely that a guy like Ricky Collins suits up for LSU for any meaningful snaps. So when I'm looking at 3 guys, it would probably be like a Womack. You also look at Ricky Collins, look at Caleb Jackson, flip the script and keep going. On defense, you'll see some defensive backs transfer, some safeties, etc. But those are the guys that I'm keeping tabs on for now.
Do you think Colin Hurley will stick around?
It's a good question. He might stick around for another year. This is a guy who got to campus. He was 16 years old in January.
That's crazy.
At 16, dude. Like, yeah. This is a kid who reclassed. For better or for worse, I think Colin Hurley, if he would have got an extra year in high school to kind of work through his process and continue to develop a little bit more, it might have helped him out to get more in-game situations under his belt. But at the end of the day, I mean, this kid enrolled at 16 years old, turned 17 in January, or January, February, whatever it was. He's got zip on the ball. He's fantastic. I don't think his future's in Baton Rouge. He might stick around for another year, but he's going to make an impact wherever else he goes because this is a super talented player. I'm kind of excited to see where he lands, whether it's like a UCF or somebody on that front because he's from the Florida area. So he could go elsewhere and make an impact, but I love Colin Hurley's game, and I like him as a person. He's such a good kid.
Yeah, I like Colin Hurley a lot. I was really excited when they got him, and then obviously they got the number one player in Bryce Underwood. So, maybe he could stick around. You never know. Wait his turn. It's kind of a rarity in college football these days, but you truly never know. Is AJ Swan? Is he a senior? Is he going to be leaving too?
I don't think he's a senior. But who knows what his future holds? He came here knowing that he would more than likely be the backup. So again, the writing could be on the wall for somebody like AJ Swan as well.
Yeah, you're gonna see a lot of turnover, and then hopefully transfer portal kind of go in there. I did hear from somebody, I don't know if it's true. They kind of didn't put a lot of money into the transfer portal last offseason and kind of put it towards more of the high school recruiting this year. Is that true? Would you say?
Yeah. I mean, Brian Kelly's transfer portal approach has been one that's a little bit concerning in my opinion. He loves to kind of not necessarily shell out the money on that front. He only goes after Louisiana athletes. I wrote something yesterday about that, just kind of like, will he change his transfer portal approach? You were in the market for defensive tackles during the offseason, and you weren't willing to kind of cough up the money, which ended up being a good decision, honestly. In my opinion, I don't think it was worth giving $1 million to unproven players who had potential. When you look at the transfer portal, you want guys who can come make an impact immediately, not potential-based. So, yeah, when it comes to money, you're gonna have to open up the checkbook and hand out blank checks. You're gonna have to shell out some cash in the portal, and you're gonna have to change your approach. It cannot be Louisiana guys.
Did you ever see that clip of Dion talking about the NIL and transfer portal and all that?
What did he say? I might have.
It was pretty interesting. I mean, I kind of didn't really think about it until he said it because everyone was giving him shit in the offseason, like, he because his recruiting class would have like 9 players or something like that, 8 players, like 6, whatever the number was. And he's like, look, like, think about college football these days. Like, you bring in 25 kids, what percentage of those kids are going to leave? And like all the media members are like, I don't know, half. So he's like, okay, so you lose half right there. So that's at like 12. He's like, all right, well then, we recruit 6 and we know these 6 are going to play. Like, he's like, yeah, he's like, we just focus on certain kids and bringing a low number in and make sure they play. We were going after, like, he's always like dogs and leaders and shit like that. But, he's like, yeah, well, we recruit low and make sure these kids play, make sure kids are superstars. And then, like, you have other schools that are taking 30 kids. And I know Brian Kelly talks about, like, taking kids in and then developing them and stuff, which might be a little bit of an outdated thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing by chance, but I think college football these days are so fluid. You bring in 20 kids and you probably retain 15 of them, 12 to 15 of them. So I thought that was really interesting. And then he's talking about NIL and all that kind of stuff. So he's like, yeah, because he's very transfer portal based, right? So Dion's just like, look, we just do everything by a transfer portal and then bring in 6 to 10 high school kids and just focus on that. I thought that was really interesting rather than relying on development.
It's not that bad of an approach. Like, it really
just doesn't look good on paper because, like, traditionally, like, you want to see the numbers in recruiting, but like college football landscape has completely changed. So yeah, I thought it was really interesting what he said.
And that's another thing. Like, Brian Kelly talked about it yesterday in his Monday press conference, was he's not a guy who wants to live and die by the transfer portal. And you have people like Deion Sanders who have a completely polar opposite approach. He wants to live and die by the portal. And Kelly's the guy who wants to sign 25 to 30 recruits, develop them for the long haul, et cetera. But you have guys who take different approaches. Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin's kind of like that as well. And then you look at a guy like Dabo Sweeney over at Clemson, who does not want to get a single player from the portal. So it's all about your approach. It's all about how you think you can do it. Obviously, we kind of know what Brian Kelly's approach is right now, for better or for worse. We'll see if he changes it up during this offseason. I think he will, because I think he has to. You have to go get immediate guys. And it's not this quantity, this massive number. If you can just go out and get 10 to 11 guys who can step in the mix immediately and make an impact, that's a win.
Yeah. No, you want to. I think it is becoming more of a. I think a top tier programs, more of a quality thing. Because it was always 25, right? And then it went to COVID year they switched it to where, like, you can take any amount you want. Mm-hmm. And then now it's just like the NIL, the way college football is, it's like maybe now it's just less. So, there's really no right answer. I guess you just got to follow the trends. Like you said, Dabo wants doesn't really believe in transfer portal, and you have Dion that that's all he
Lives and
believes in.
dies by it. Yeah.
So it's just like it. I guess you got to follow the trends. There's really no right answer to it this early on, but yeah, you kind of want the coach to be on the right side of things. Just the way how the landscape has changed as a whole. So, yeah, I thought that was really interesting what he said. But yeah, we'll see. But yeah, I think LSU if Brian Kelly, I mean, obviously people call him for his head, but he has to be like heavily involved in the transfer portal this offseason for him to, I want to keep a chance. Next year, I mean, do you think if Brian Kelly has 2 L's and doesn't, or 3 L's next year and doesn't make the CFP, do you think he'd get fired? Like he'd be in that kind of position?
I can't envision that being the case. One, that buyout is crazy. It's a $60 million buyout. 60 mil. And I think 2026 is your year. I think 2025 isn't necessarily going to be as bad as this year. I don't think you can afford to have another year like this year. I think next year you'll kind of take a step up from what happened this year. And then 2026 is where you're going to be competing for a national championship. You'll have your recruiting class from 2025 this year. You'll have those guys be developed, and then you'll bring in some portal additions as well, and your staff will be pretty much solidified. So I think when you're looking at a national championship contending team, 2026 is going to be your year. I don't think anything happens with BK in 2025.
Yeah, no, I mean, you shell out $100 million, you're committed. So, do you think Nussmeier comes back next year?
I think it's in his best interest to come back next year. I think he was a guy who had anticipation that he would be here to start for 2 years, no matter what, anyway, in 2024 and 2025. Obviously, if he continued on the trajectory that he did over the first 5-6 weeks of the season and was a lock to be a first rounder, certainly he would have departed and gone for the NFL draft. But now, with his stock kind of tanking a little bit and falling over the last couple of weeks, I think it's in his best interest to return, develop under Joe Sloan, develop in the system. We've seen the jump that players have made. Joe Burrow, Jaden Daniels from year 1 to year 2 as the starters. So I think it's in his best interest to come back. I would anticipate Garrett Nussmeier being back in 2025.
And then you just see like Bryce Underwood just kind of seldomly playing for certain. I could see him kind of being like a player who comes in certain situations for Nussmeier, because Nussmeier moves like an 80-year-old woman. Like he can't move around at all. So I was kind of telling my friend, I was like, dude, whoever drafts Nussmeier, they better have a good O-line, because he cannot run it. He can't run up the reins. So
it's tough. It's like Garrett Nussmeier is like kind of like your old school quarterback. He's just a pure pocket passer. There is no mobility. And it's challenging because a lot of this LSU offense was and is kind of based off of quarterbacks being able to move just a little bit. Obviously, you tweak it with Joe Sloan as the play caller, and you have Garrett Nussmeier as your quarterback. But to a certain degree, looking at last year, it's a lot of quarterback mobility there and the ability to extend the play and roll out and do what you can. I'm not saying Garrett Nussmeier isn't athletic, because he is. He just needs to make the decision.
Yeah, he just chooses not to move. It's his choice. Yeah. There's a lot of plays you see, you're like, dude, you could move around a little bit.
Hell yeah.
He just doesn't move at all. So, yeah, no, that's what it is. But yeah, going from Jaden Daniels and Nussmeier, you lose a big dynamic of your offense. So,
and it's exposed the O-line. I mean, you've seen your offensive line regress significantly, and I think Jaden Daniels was a player who made the O-line look good last year in a certain way. I'm not saying the O-line is just diabolically bad, but it certainly is not good, and there's no depth on the interior. And I think Jaden Daniels made them look good last year and kind of hid the cracks of the O-line. And now, yeah, I mean, you're seeing crack after crack after crack.
Well, I think O-line's solid. I think losing Dellinger was really underrated. Not enough people talk about that. But I think, you have the 2 best tackles in the country. But I mean, like, what percentage of the pressures or sacks, whatever you want to call it, has been him just holding onto the ball? Like
that too.
Yeah. So there's you really don't know. But yeah, we'll touch on Vandy real quick. Have you done any like tape study on Vandy? Obviously, they got a pretty fun quarterback up there. What do you see?
Man, that dude is dynamic. He's a guy who can extend the play. I mean, this is the prototypical kryptonite for LSU. We've seen Jalen Milroe. We've seen not even nearly Taylor Green, but we've seen Jalen Milroe and other quarterbacks kind of come in and give LSU hell. Diego Pavia is one of those guys who can do the exact same thing. He has tremendous extendability. He can roll out, make plays with his legs, roll out, throw the ball. He's the kryptonite. So I'm intrigued to see how LSU kind of adjusts to kind of limit his play. Personnel-wise, LSU is the better team. LSU has better offense. LSU has better defense. They have better everything, in my opinion. They're that much better than Vanderbilt. And I think they'll come out and win. I don't see them losing at home at 6:45 at night in Tiger Stadium to Vanderbilt. I just don't see it. I think they win. But I certainly do think that this is going to be one where LSU has to be prepared, or else you're in for another disaster.
One thing no one's talked about too. I remember I did this for the Arkansas game a couple years ago, but the game starts an hour after the sun's going down, dude.
Yep.
The Tiger Stadium's gonna be fucking liquored up for that game. So, you get there an hour before the game starts and the band's going, and you just like people are just holding on. So, hopefully LSU, can get a dub, and we'll see. 9 points is a little heavy on the spread, but
is it up to 9 now?
I saw it on 9 yesterday. I haven't looked recently.
Oh my Lord. I was on DraftKings and I was looking, it was 7.5, which is still a tremendous amount.
Let's see what ESPN has it at. Yeah, 7.5. It opened at 9, now it's 7.5. So a lot of Vandy money. People are recency bias. So
yeah,
kind of rightfully so.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of points, but this is going to be a good one. I still don't think I'm not buying stock in LSU this week. I just can't buy stock in the
I like the over a lot. 53.5. LSU's defense can't stop a nosebleed, and I think LSU is going to be kind of aggressive on offense. So I like that number a lot, but we'll see. I know one thing you wanted to talk about before we go is some players that are possibly coming back for the NFL, or coming back and then also entering the NFL draft. Who are some names to keep an eye on for going into the NFL draft this year?
Yeah, so I know a lot of people are going to want to talk about your Harold Perkinses of the world, your Emery Jones, etc. I had a list of them that I was going to look at, but for me, those are the two that I'm wanting to keep tabs on for the most part.
Well, I mean, Emery Jones is probably a lock, right?
Wait, what?
Emery Jones got to be a lock.
No, honestly, in my opinion, I think it would be in his best interest to come back next year. Mm-hmm. He's a player who NFL scouts want to see just a little bit more film on him and what he's all about. I think you could see him slide to the guard position next year if he were to return. But I think Emery Jones can come back and boost his stock just a little bit more. He's a player who has significant upside, and he didn't necessarily live up to the billing this year at all. And then the guy, Harold Perkins, I mean, everybody wants to know what's going to happen with him, and I want to know what happens too. What would you kind of expect? I'll flip it to you real quick.
I think Emery Jones is he's gonna get a first or second round grade, and he's gonna come back. I don't see him being like a top 15 pick.
You mean he's gonna go?
Yeah. I mean, too much stuff can go wrong. I know you're talking about him going to guard because he played guard in high school. That's what he originally came out. And I remember they're like, "Oh yeah, he's your starting right tackle." I was like, "What the hell?" So that was it's pretty difficult to do. But I would see that having maybe someone offers a big NIL package. Who knows? But crazy world today. And the Harold Perkins, that's 50-50. I guess it's really going to come down to what kind of grade he's going to get before in the pre-draft process. But I mean, he's an undersized guy. I would not be surprised. He has an ACL tear, and he's kind of regressed a little bit every single year he's played. So I would. Let me ask you this before I give you my answer. Who do you see more coming back, Emery Jones or Harold Perkins?
It's a great question. I mean, it's $1 million question. I to keep it short and sweet, Harold Perkins, it would be tough for me to envision him coming back and risking an injury and continuing to regress, like you alluded to. Emery Jones is going to have the higher draft grade, and at the same time, to contradict myself, NFL scouts want to see more film. I've talked to some people about it, and that's another thing that a lot of people are going to be kind of debating. So I'm going to say, and it's going to be wrong, but I'd say Harold Perkins has a better chance of leaving than Emery Jones. So I'll contradict myself in a way.
I'd say the opposite.
I think that's a completely valid. I think that is completely valid, and I completely agree with it. I'm almost playing devil's advocate because I kind of knew that was going to be the approach. But just people that I've talked to, I don't know. I can't really envision Emery leaving at this point in time. A lot will change in the next 3 or 4 weeks, but at this point in time, on November 19th at 2 p.m., that's where I'm at.
I would assume Aaron Anderson's coming back, right?
Hell yeah.
And then who else? I mean, CJ Daniels, he's out of eligibility.
He has 1 more year, I was told.
That would be interesting. I could see him coming back. I could see him. In my opinion, I think CJ Daniels is LSU's best receiver. Him and Anderson, but
yeah, I like that. It's a good take.
And then Hilton, there's no way he's gone, right? Could he transfer out, or is he out of eligibility?
No, he has another year of eligibility. He's a redshirt junior, but earlier when we were talking about guys who could potentially transfer out.
Well, he's
I
gone.
certainly think Chris Hilton would be a guy that's at the top of the list.
Yeah, no, he should go to UL. Honestly, I think that's a great place
Future
for him.
Cajun.
Yeah, I mean he's from Louisiana, so I mean I don't see any SEC program going after him considering how abysmal he's been this year. But we'll see. Who knows? Do you think any of these freshman receivers could get playing time towards the end of the year? I really like Jelani Watkins. He's really
I'd love to see Jelani Watkins get on the field. I love Kylan Billiot too. I think Billiot's
Yeah.
a guy who's super polished and can make an impact next year for sure. And I don't think he's played in that many, if any, games so far this year. So he might be able to still play and keep his red shirt without burning it. You can see him on the field. I'd say.
What about Sampson? He's kind of gotten swept under the rug now.
I don't know. Again, when you're talking about guys who could potentially transfer out, I think Shelton Sampson could be a guy on that list as well. The writing's on the wall. You didn't get the production that you wanted from him, and in turn, you turn Trey'Dez Green to a receiver to get him on the field and have him go above Shelton Sampson on the depth chart. For me, it's a little bit unique.
They need to start using Green more. Every time they use him, he lights it up. I don't understand the disconnect.
He's fantastic.
I don't know, but yeah. Is there anything else you want to touch on?
That is it. I'm about to take this call at 2:10 on the dot.
All right, cool. Appreciate you guys tuning in, and see you next week.